Hello and welcome to another episode of Primetime, another mentor episode of Primetime. It's always my endeavor to try and get interesting people from different walks of life, people who are in completely varied professions and pursuits. And I'm absolutely thrilled today that I have a very, very popular RJ, Rochie, and she's got quite the fan following. If memory serves me, she's got almost 250,000 followers on Instagram, just shy of 500,000 on Facebook. She's got fan pages dedicated to her. Of course, that's the glamorous side of it. But in terms of us and the purpose of this interview, we have Rochie on to try and understand from her, of course, her life journey, but more importantly, how she got into radio and how she has made such a successful career and a well-established career out of it for those youngsters particularly who might want to follow suit and also explore becoming RJs or going into the radio medium. So it's absolutely my pleasure to welcome you, Rochie.
Thank you, Kartik. It's such a pleasure being here. It took us a while to get here, but I'm so happy that we're here now and we're talking.
I'm delighted as well. Okay, wonderful. So without wasting much time, why
Hmm.
don't you tell us a little bit about your childhood, your growing up years?
So I had a very routine childhood. I was an average student for most part till I went into the 11th grade, and then I had the field that I was very comfortable pursuing, which was the arts. So it was sociology, history. I was really happy studying, but I was honestly like such a nerd, and I was always such a bookworm that I wasn't doing much else. So I mean, I'm sure you have other people talking about how they were really good at playing basketball or they did theater. I didn't do anything except just read books and study. It's only when I went to college that my life changed and I got like a certain worldview of things. But before that, I
Let,
was just a bookworm.
so let me interrupt you very quickly and sort of pause you there before you get into college. I want to just focus on your formative years a little bit more and where did you go to school? And at school, therefore, would you categorize yourself as a bit of an introvert?
So I went to school. I went to Presentation Convent in Delhi, and it was a school my mom went to. So it was really just we were following tradition. I didn't. I thought the education system was just about okay. It wasn't doing anything to enhance what I was good at and try and make better what I wasn't good at. I was an introvert. I didn't have very many friends back in the day, and I was also terrible at math. And that's a legacy I'm still carrying forth. I continue to be terrible at math.
Hmm.
So yeah, those were
We
my
can share the
formative years.
sentiment because I'm probably one of the few Marwadis who's very poor at math.
How can a Marwadi be pure at math? Like that's not
Well,
allowed. I think you're born with that.
fact is stranger than fiction.
That's true. My life is a living
So,
example of that.
so, what were the kind of things that you would say you were? You mentioned, of course, that you were a bookworm, but what were the kind of things that interested you during your schooling years? What were you? Were there any very specific hobbies or areas that you were very passionate about?
So I used to love reading. And then there's
Hmm.
this little secret which I haven't shared with anybody, and I'm now sharing with you that I used to, back in the day, like writing reviews. Now, I didn't know what critiquing something was. And I mean, what does the little kid know anyway, right? But if I had heard like a music album or I'd read a book, I would in my journal, and I would journal a lot. I was very passionate about journaling. I remember even as a child. So I would pretend write these reviews. And little did I know that in the long run, that's what I'd be doing a lot of. I'd be writing a lot. So I used to love doing that, but I remember just love reading and I love the world of Enid Blyton. So for me, that fantasy world, that happy world where everybody was happy, everyone was eating scones and jam and clotted cream. Yeah, I think that was my secret world I always used to escape into. So I was an introvert, yes.
That's lovely. But you brought up a very interesting point, and I keep advising my students, especially in the past couple of years and the very strange times that we have been through and continue to go through, I keep advising a lot of my students and youngsters to journal. And you said you used to journal regularly. How did you develop that habit? Did somebody tell you to do that?
I think I was extreme because I was an introvert. I didn't have very many friends. So where does an
Uh-huh.
introvert really go to pour their feelings? And everyone has feelings. It was such an organic byproduct of being an introvert. And if you I have all of my journals from back in the day. So I have a
Wow.
chest full of drawers which has only my journals. So if you look at it, initially it was very strange. Such and such person didn't talk to me yet again at work. I was so terrible at basketball. They threw me out of the team yet again. And over the years, it's grown. But I must say this, Kartik, I think everyone should emphasize on the importance of journaling because it gives us such fantastic perspective on what we're going through in life that no matter what age you are and no matter what feelings you have as a person, the kind of perspective putting it down on paper gives to you is unparalleled, in my
Hmm.
opinion.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so you go through school fairly anonymously, one can gather, and then what changes at college suddenly?
So it wasn't actually college that changed things for me. So I was
Uh,
terrible at basketball and math and science, and I didn't get anything right. And then the 11th grade had me focus only on subjects that I really liked, right? So suddenly there was sociology, there was history, there was English. I was very comfortable with these subjects. And right then, things turned for me. I became a sparkling student. Suddenly, from like a little, I think, under mediocrity, I rose to being a topper. And then in the 12th grade, so we had a school election system for the head girl and the deputy head girl, so on and so forth. And my name was nominated by the teachers in the 11th standard. And I was 12, yeah, 12. So I was very surprised when that happens. And then I got elected as the head girl. So
okay.
it was right after break time in school. The results were announced. And suddenly, from wearing like a school uniform, which was just like a white salwar kameez, I was wearing this sash of all the house colors. That changed my life, you know.
But
Suddenly,
as wonderful and great an achievement as that was, and I want to focus on this bit a little more seriously because I mean, obviously you took it very well. But if that same sudden responsibility were to be bestowed upon an otherwise shy, reticent kid, it might have gone the other way as well. So, were you at all anxious or nervous when you assumed your role as head girl?
I was very excited at first. See, the thing is, Kartik, I was never, the girl who was hanging out with the cool kids in school. So being a head girl really just made it a little bit harder for me because here I was upholding whatever school standards for hygiene, perfection, good behavior, etc., so on and so forth were. And I was very unrelenting in doing my duties because I was always a responsible, reticent child, right? So it kind of enhanced the good traits that I had, which were being responsible, but it also alienated me from the others because suddenly I was the one pointing out saying you need to clip your nails, or I
Sure,
was the one
sure. I mean,
saying,
it's not a
you know,
popular position to be in.
no, it's not. And I kind of suffered the brunt of it in the sense that it further alienated me from the cool girls I wanted to hang with, never got the chance to do it. But I took it with a pinch of salt. I mean, honestly, I was so happy with the fact that, I mean, look, Karthik, at the end of the day, everyone enjoys being different from the rest, especially if it's in positions of power or responsibility. So I think that kind of balanced itself out. So I think if I look back, it wasn't so bad.
Okay, good. So you become head girl and you have presumably a successful tenure as head girl, and you do exceedingly well at your board exams. And then what happens?
And then I make it to Hindu college.
Hmm.
Um, so I had only applied to Stevens in Hindu college in Delhi.
Okay.
And I was very sure, I was dead sure I'll get through because I did really well in my CBSE. And so I went to college. I got English honors at Stephens and sociology honors in Hindu. I chose the latter because my mom said that English is something you take to really well. Sociology is so challenging, so don't you want to push yourself and challenge yourself? In the interim, though, I must tell you, while I was still in school, there was a my mom's friend who had just launched a magazine called Aviva. So this was a bit of a like a magazine which was kind of intellectual, a lot like how Platform magazine is in the day. So
Mhm.
she reached out to me, the editor, and she said, "Why don't you edit the teen pages for us?"
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so that was very strange because nobody really knew I was journaling and I was writing critiques for nobody. So I
Right.
took on that role, and that's where my first experience of the media sort of came into being because I had
Mhm.
started editing the teen pages for this magazine, and that
Mhm.
continued for about 2 years. So I was still writing when the transition from school to college happened for me. And then, of course, college life is a whole new world. You meet the world in college.
Right. And what happens when you meet the world in your case?
Um, I made my first boyfriend.
Hmm.
Also, and I continued to study. I mean, I was still very obsessed with sociology. I still wanted to be a topper. I did fairly well through college,
Okay.
but I made more friends.
Hmm.
I lost weight. I became more confident of myself. I think just, having a boyfriend makes you feel kind of special and wanted. So that changed for me as well. Suddenly I felt like I wasn't a backbencher anymore.
Hmm.
And college was less cruel than school. So there was no definite divide between, you're this bookworm and you wear spectacles, so we will not hang out with you. College was, I think, for me, more embracing. And I had
Less,
done this.
sorry to interrupt. Do you mean that college was perhaps less judgmental?
I think college was also judgmental, but how they were judging people became a whole different parameter. So
Okay.
while in school, I wasn't, I mean, I was just this bookworm who was at a certain point doing really well, and then the head girl, etc., etc. In college, it's just the whole parameter is really different. What language are you talking? What kind of music are you listening to? It the I guess the classification of judging people becomes far wider, and I was being able to fit in more. I think I fit in better in college than I did in school. Also, I think it's a
You
factor of age.
right. You quickly slipped in the fact that you lost weight and that made you feel much more confident. Speak a little bit about this because it's something that a lot of youth struggles with, body image issues, and it's a very, very vital facet of life to I suppose, especially for them to hear from somebody like you about.
So I was quite overweight. I had thyroid since I was 13. I wanted to lose weight, Karthik, and that wasn't kind of happening in school. In college, I happened to organically lose weight. So I think I went from 87 kilos to then 72 kilos, and then progressively became leaner over the years. And I've had fluctuating weight ever since. And I'll tell you honestly, I mean, I'm being as honest as I can be. Even though right now I'm at my optimum weight, if I put on a kilo, uh, the girl who was overweight inside me, who still lives, gets extremely upset. So no
Mm.
one in my office now understands when I say, you know what, I put on weight, and they mock me and they say it's just a kilo. But
Right,
I know um, the kind of trauma it is being overweight in a world where everything is so superficial.
right.
I'm still the same person I always was. But
Sure.
no one gave me a chance because I wasn't physically the kind of body type that was um, appreciated or aesthetically considered optimum. That
Right.
said, I also realized in my journey of life, Karthik, and now I meditate an awful lot today. I have realized that a lot of times when we have a lot of weight on our bodies, it is really a psychological function of stress, of
Sure.
anxiety.
Of
Most
course.
people I've spoken to as a counselor, so I've been counseling for about 15 years now. People I've met and I have counseled, I have always found that the more stressed they become, the more they put on weight. So, Kartik, it's true even for people who join new workplaces. It's a statistic that they tend to put on anywhere between 3 to 7 kilos in
Hmm.
3 months of joining an organization. That happens to children in school and in colleges as well.
Hmm.
Whenever there's a
Transition.
psychologically threatening environment,
Ah, okay, okay.
our body tends to put on weight.
Right.
So I would judge that if someone in my friend circle has just put on weight, I usually think it's not a factor of overeating so much as it is
Mhm.
not of a terrible lifestyle either. I think it's a lot of
Something
stress and
psychological.
anxiety.
Right, right, right. Okay, okay. All right. So now let's move and talk a little bit about how your writing, metamorphosed or transitioned into the various other things that you started doing. You you've been on television, you've been, and then ultimately radio. So just take us through that journey a little bit from the editing teen pages to ultimately becoming an RJ, which I find personally so fascinating because again, to me, it's this shy, reticent girl who's now in the diametric polar opposite role, where you have to be, affable and chatty and charming and all of those things that you do so well. So one would never sort of imagine that you were that person, and perhaps lurking somewhere in there still are a little bit.
I think we're all. I'm an ambivert. So 9 to 5, I'm an extrovert, and then 5 to 9, I'm an introvert. I love being left alone. I love my solitude. So you're right about that. So Kartik, I think once I quit college, I went to Bombay briefly to Xavier's to pursue public relations. I came back to Delhi and I joined an advertising agency in the capacity of client servicing. So that was also very people oriented, right? Because you are now suddenly trying to speak to clients and speaking to people back in the office and communicating ideas. So communication was key, right? From the time I think I became the head girl, right? So I
Right.
had no problem communicating and expressing myself clearly. It
Mhm.
so happened that while I was working in this ad agency, which was a boutique ad agency, so a hot shop, so to speak, our copywriter just suddenly upped and left. So they
Okay.
said, why don't you fill in for the time being? What
Okay.
started off as time being became, okay, she's going to be the client servicing executive and she's also going to write copy. And then I think soon after I wanted to transition and I wanted to write. And that's when I started writing articles and columns for Midday.
Okay.
My then editor, Sanjay Kapoor, was extremely, I mean, I would think of him as some sort of a mentor for me
Mhm.
because he said, you write so well. And I really thought he used to just lie and tell me I wrote so well. But he was extremely encouraging. And he said, why don't you write more, write for other magazines as well? So I was writing for Swagat, which was Air India's in
Right.
house magazine. I
Right.
was also writing for Midday. I started
Mhm.
India's Chocolate Club somewhere in the middle,
Mhm.
um, which was also something I happened to speak to Sanjay Kapoor about, and he was extremely encouraging. So that happened in the middle. But by and large, I was still writing. And then for many years, I was writing for different publications, just being a columnist and never really like working as an employee, but being a freelance journalist.
Right.
And then one day I get this call from Radio Today asking if I was interested in being a producer for
Okay.
a channel they were launching. This
Mhm.
is about 10, 12 years ago. So I said, oh, sure, why not? And by then, my first book had just come out, 30 Days
Mhm.
of Hope, which was, again, something I always wanted to do. I wanted to write my first book before I turned 25. And it was out, and I was extremely happy. And it made me a little bit of money. But suddenly there was this radio job that was offering obscene amounts of money. And I felt like, I can't let this opportunity pass. So I said, yeah, sure, I would love to be a producer. So, in the capacity of having been a writer, they said, we'll make you the producer of a show called Plane Train Ghoda Gadi. Now, this was
Okay.
very fascinating because it was the journey of an RJ across India on every
Uh-huh.
possible
Mode of
vehicle.
transport.
Yeah, every possible mode of transport. So I was very excited about it. I didn't know it was India's first talk radio station. So
Mhm.
we were launching India's first talk radio station. It was meant only for women, niche after niche after niche. I was very excited. I was on board. This plane train Ghoda Gadi wasn't taking off because the logistics were a nightmare.
No pun
Meanwhile,
intended.
right, really, this plane wasn't taking off.
Huh.
So it was a nightmare, and I was doing the afternoon shows production in its entirety. Everything was going on. So we're a startup. No one's sleeping. Everyone's constantly at work. We were sleeping on the carpet, etc., etc. We had this morning jock who was really good, but for some strange reason, she just wasn't working for the station, and she
Okay.
knew it as well. And she had a co-host. Now this co-host wasn't working either, and whatever it was happening for us, we didn't really care. I had nothing to do with the morning show. So one day, both of these jocks do not arrive. And because we're
Mhm.
like living in that radio station, it's early in the morning, we're close to going on air and it's live. So there was no pre-recording it, there was no deferred live. If it was 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock we were going on air with what we didn't know because this was a talk radio station, so we didn't have access to music. So it wasn't like traditionally you could say, "Ha, music baja do non-stop
Correct.
4 ghante ke liye." There was
Right.
no. So suddenly my CEO, also boss, also producer, also chai wala bhaiya, we were all everything because it's a startup. He runs up to us, me and another colleague of mine. You guys must go on air. So this was frightening, right? It's 6:30 a.m. And suddenly you're saying you must go on air. And I barely understand the software. Anyway, cut a long story short, we do go on air and the show is over. Now we don't know what we've done. Really, like Jayashree, who is my co-host for the day, she and I basically just packed around the place and said whatever we enjoy talking about. And we had
Right.
thankfully read the papers that morning. So we weren't
Mhm.
talking about things that happened in 1952. The
Right.
show gets over, the boss opens the door and he's cartwheeling. And he says, "You
Uh-huh.
guys are so good, so good." And the next thing you know is for 3 years, I was the morning host for that show.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is it, very blatant proof of your talent, but now this has happened a couple of times where you've been at the right place at the right time because you transitioned in your ad agency by default. And
Yes.
here you are at your radio startup where you just happen to be there. So you're pulled into that role. That's wonderful. Okay.
I feel like Kartik, even when I was writing the book, right, the first book that I wrote before I turned 25, I used to go to this is so intimate what I'm sharing with you, but whenever I would like wash my hair, brush my teeth, whatever I was doing by myself, I would pretend that I was giving out interviews for my first book that was launched. So at
Mm-hmm.
that point, there was no such book called The Secret. There was nothing that I knew which was a reference to manifestation. But I
Right.
believe that if you truly believe in yourself and you believe in what you want to achieve, and you believe that you're doing your best and you're working really hard, I think these three components, believing in yourself, believing that the world is designed to love you, and you're working hard, everything manifests itself. So I think it's just my love for the mic, my love for the camera. So anyway, I did this and this fantastic 3 year run I had with radio. And then Fever called me to join them at a far higher salary. So 3 years of
Mhm.
morning show was a lot of fun. Now I wanted to try something different. So I
Mhm.
went to Fever, and now I had come from a talk radio show where 14 minutes of nonstop chatting was just about fine. And I
Right.
go into this universe where A, I'm supposed to sell songs, B, I'm supposed to talk for 30 seconds. I
Right.
can barely introduce myself in 30 seconds. I didn't have it in me. So I
Mm.
bowed out, I think, in 3 months of that. And then I
Okay.
had to look for another job. Now, I
Mm.
didn't want to write anymore because I said, Chalo, that's all I've done enough. Let's try something new. And by then, my voice had become fairly recognized in Delhi. So I got this call. Strangely, touch wood, I've never had to go looking for a job. I got this call saying, "There's this particular company that wants your voice for voiceover." Now I'm thinking to myself, um, voiceovers, I've never done it. Voiceovers don't pay. I had all kinds of. mm, I think it was the whole myth of you just do voiceovers once and it's over. that
Mm-hmm.
I used to believe. So they said,
Mm-hmm.
"Nahin, this client really wants you," and all of that jazz. So I went to the studio and I did my first voiceover, which wasn't so bad, but it turns out they loved it. And I love doing voiceovers. The person you're trying to call has put your call on hold. I had the time of my life doing it, and that became my mainstay for many years, for many,
Okay.
many years. So I was doing voiceovers for Reliance. I was doing voiceovers for many companies, briefly for Vodafone Idea, but largely for every Reliance product that they had.
Okay.
So Tata Docomo, etc., so on and so forth. So while I was doing this, and I was a freelancer, I was going home from doing my voiceovers one day. I get a call on the phone, and this is a colleague from an ex like college friend who's now working with NDTV Good Times. She says, "Hey, you know what? We want an anchor. Are you interested?" So I've never done television in my life, but I am obviously interested. So I said, "Yes, of course I am." So I'm very close to their office. She says, "When can you come for an audition?" I was in an auto then, and I said, "Yeah, I can come right now." So I went right then, and they took me up to the canteen and they said, "It's for a food show. We want you to be an anchor, but we don't have any of the props right now." So I said, "Ha, we can turn tissue papers into props and pens and pencils." I was so excited. So I
Mm-hmm.
used my brain and I made an omelette out of a pen, a tissue paper, and God knows what. And they loved how I took to the camera, and they couldn't believe that I hadn't ever faced the camera, and I hadn't. I
Mm-hmm.
landed my first job with NDTV Good Times as an anchor. And then I worked with them for 5 years, doing
Wow.
various things. They also sent me to Vienna, where I didn't have the money to travel outside myself. I went and covered Christmas, thanks to NDTV Good Times. So yeah, well, yeah. So NDTV happened, and then I was still writing, and then I beach me started doing tarot. So I do multiple things. So I've been a
Yes.
tarot card reader for a very, very long time. Um, and then cut to now, in 2016, I get a call from, and beach me, I had done a couple of color therapy shows for Radio Mirchi because I'm also a color therapist. So that those were one-offs. But I knew the then chief programming officer really well. So I get a call from him in 2016 saying, "I want you to record this pilot for me." And I have utmost regard for him. So I couldn't say no. And I had just broken up and I was heartbroken. And I said, "I don't want to work and I want to not do anything in my life." But I just went and did this pilot. But it was a pilot about love and relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
again, the counselor in me, the color therapist in me, you must dream big person inside me got like this new lease of life. I had a great time. They called me for a second pilot. Then they called me up again and said, "We really love what you do. So how about becoming a syndicated job for the 9 o'clock onwards slot?"
Mm-hmm.
And then I lost it. I got so nervous. I said, "I've never done a 9 to 5 job. It's been so long. I can't do it. I can't do it." So my then national programming head, Vishal, said, "Listen, we'll make it comfortable for you. You're not going to jail." So a 9 to 5 job felt like going to jail. So anyway, then I took on the job, and the rest of this is history. I mean, at it.
Oh, okay. So that's quite a, that's quite a diverse career you've encapsulated for us. Lots of food for thought also. But I want to ask you two very specific questions. One of them might sound a bit repetitive, but I don't think I've got a satisfactory enough answer yet. And then I will quickly move on to asking you about some advice for younger people, and then we'll sort of conclude. But what I want to ask you first is these two things. One is that really, and introspect a little bit and try and tell me how uh, an essentially shy girl is so enthusiastic about taking on these very, very public roles. Number one. And number two, throughout this journey of yours, particularly from the time you started working, because most of us in our lives has somebody of playing that role, if not multiple people. So who is this one person or one or two people who are your constant support system? Is it a parent? Is it a significant other? Who is this person who is sort of backing you and is constant validation in your life?
Um, so Kartik, I was as much as I was an introvert, and a lot of people believe that introverts inherently don't want anything to do with the world. I have come to realize that the more someone is quiet and reticent, the more probably deep down inside they want to be the opposite. Like I
Mm.
said, I'm an ambivert. I enjoy both the world outside and I love
Mm.
the solitude that I have.
Mm.
As an introvert, secretly, I wanted to conquer the world, you
Mm.
know, and that was a deep desire. I wanted to be
Right.
famous. I wanted people to know me, and being famous was a thing I wanted since I was a little girl.
Right.
It was just that I was such an introvert that it was impossible for an introvert to say it out loud without people mocking that. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't talk to the next person you have met, but you want to be famous. So that was a desire. Every time I had an opportunity to go out there and be seen or be heard, I was not willing to let that go. That said, my mom has been a huge supporter, and she's been my biggest critic as well. So if she feels like something has gone to my head, the fame has a tendency of being very intoxicating. She is very quick to point that out to me. That said, for most part, when I was just growing up and learning that this world isn't such a bad place and we can really experiment and be who we want to be, in the sense of if I wanted to write, if I wanted to experiment with voiceovers, at
Right.
that point, I was dating someone for a very long time, um, who was extremely open to the idea of me trying new things. Contrary to a lot of men in India I've met, and I'm going to get so much backlash for this, men still continue to have a slightly misogynist streak about them. As
Sure.
recently as, I mean, I dated someone very briefly recently who had a problem. We were both in the same competitive field. And he felt that my success had a lot to do with the fact that I was a woman. And he was
Hmm.
willing to completely overlook the kind of effort and work I put into what I do.
Right.
So I was lucky to be with somebody who believed that women were equal and some women were more equal than others. And he was absolutely happy letting me experiment with things and going out there. He came to meetings with me, Karthik, where because I was younger, I wasn't comfortable meeting people in the corporate world. He would
Hmm.
attend these meetings with me where he would absolutely kind of vanish into the background and allow me to take center stage. But I had the security of knowing that someone I love and trust is right there for me.
Right.
I must say that on their own, a person cannot achieve half the things they set out to unless they have
Hmm.
a great support system. I don't think
Right.
we
Which is
emphasize,
precisely why I asked you the question.
because had I not been with Gotham at that point in time and my mom through till date, I wouldn't have been half as successful as I think I am.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay, so that's very candid. Thank you for sharing that. And now, finally, let's come to. I mean, of course, I knew getting into this that I want to focus on radio, primarily because that is your current role and you're very, very, popular for that. If I started asking you about each of your pursuits, we'd be here all day,
That's
which is not possible. So let's talk specifically about radio and what I know this is a very generic kind of question, but try and answer it. What advice would you have for young aspirants who want to get into RJing?
So, I feel like there's a lot of myth about if you can talk pretty,
Hmm.
you can
Hmm.
be an RJ.
Okay,
That's
yeah, that's
not
correct.
true. In fact, just yesterday I was sitting down. We were hiring at the moment for the Delhi office, and I was sitting and talking to a couple of people who had applied for the post. Just talking pretty isn't enough. You need to know what's going on in the world. You need to be very well informed. You need to have a world view of things. One needs to be opinionated, Karthik, because if you don't have an opinion on things, you can't spin them till you have a certain perspective on what's going on. A.
Hmm.
B, I think being able to be creative at the drop of a hat is so essential. My
Hmm.
show is a show we record, right? Because it goes all over the country. But then the rest of the shows are all live. which
Hmm.
means that there could be news that's just come in. And you need to have the bandwidth and you need to have the ability to put a spin on it, make it sound different from what, say, the other radio stations are doing, and then go ahead and present it. That said, RJing is no longer just a radio job. It's not that your voice will be heard and your face will not be seen. And this is a change that's taking place over the entire industry as I
Sure.
speak, because we've been having a lot of meetings across stations and brands, because now everyone is shifting to taking their RJs and putting them on social media as well. So if
Right.
you're not a content creator, if you don't know what you want to say and you don't know how to say it in 30 seconds, 1 minute, and long form videos, you don't stand a chance. So it's a
Hmm.
really, really tough industry at the moment and it's
Right.
transitioning. So it's
Right.
a very confusing place to be in because you
Hmm.
might be hired to be an RJ. I was hired to be an RJ.
Hmm.
And 2 months into it, I was asked to be on Instagram. I was doing the same thing I was doing for ndtv Good Times, right? It's no different. And you have just that little phone of yours and you don't have a team behind you. You're doing
Right.
your own makeup. So you need to be really, it's a beauty pageant, Karthik.
Yeah.
Being an RJ at the moment is a beauty
Hmm.
pageant. You need to have your wits about you at all times.
Hmm.
So I would say if someone thinks that they have a great voice and they can just talk nonstop, that's not even the tip of the iceberg for the moment for the industry. And it's a lot of hard work. We
Hmm.
sometimes end up working 12 hours a day. You get like a client wants to do an integration, they want to do a video with you, and they want to do it in the next 3 hours. No matter where you are, you need to be there, you need to present yourself and do a great job and be available for multiple edits. So it is not a pretty, it's not as pretty as it looks. There's definitely tons that goes behind the glamour.
That's
So
huge.
people come,
Sorry.
sorry,
Sorry. Carry.
people come believing that, you just, the show is a 4 hour show. You're going to be there for 4 hours. 4 hours, you're going to get paid $1 million and you're going to be the next richest person on the block. That's not how it is. That's a myth.
You This is hugely insightful because I mean, even for a person like me, and what you're saying now, when I think about it, as you're speaking, makes complete sense because as the world is going more visual, you really have to. I suppose every RJ needs to be like any actor, where you have to be present on social media. You have to be engaging your fan base regularly. You have to be feeding them content constantly. Yeah, so it seems like a lot. And you so okay, so then the natural corollary to that question would be that then what should somebody who is young and wanting to be an RJ do? Like, is there some sort of training academy that exists? Can they go and learn somewhere, or what should they do really? How should they sort of navigate the waters and get a start, or try and get a start?
See, there are many universities that specialize in radio training. We have the Bennett University, right, which is an affiliation of the Bennett and Coleman Group that teaches radio. There are universities that specialize in teaching you radio. But I feel when we pick up people for an RJ's role, we tend to look at what their social media content creation is. Because Kartik, that's where we're going. We're no
Hmm.
longer even called RJs. Like I am not called RJ Rochie. I'm called
Hmm.
Mirchi Rochie, and Mirchi is a
Hmm.
brand. So
Hmm.
you'll see me if Mirchi has a Mirchi Music Award. You will
Right.
find me either performing there or
Right.
hosting a
Right.
segment. So what a person needs to do is be extremely creative,
Hmm.
confident,
Hmm.
that they can pull off any role assigned to them.
Hmm.
If you think you can do that, because radio is currently changing, I can say that for Mirchi. We are no longer even Radio Mirchi. We are now just Mirchi. So
Hmm.
if you think of something, say it's a cookery show, and I love to cook, then they're going to ask me, why don't we put up a show on, say, MX Player, which is also a part of the group, or on the national page that we have. So
Right.
in essence, what I'm saying is training is a good thing. It's a great start. But how are great actors made? Great actors don't necessarily go to training academies, right?
No.
They have the talent. They have
Yes.
the desire to succeed. What I would say and what my current programming head says about the job is that if you have the burning desire to succeed, then currently the role of an RJ is just what you need to make it big. I agree.
But obviously, you have to have, or a worthy candidate would need to have a certain kind of disposition and also be fairly multi-talented or multi-dimensional.
I mean,
So
right
it's not,
now, we look for people who can edit their own videos. So one
wow.
would have never guessed that to be an RJ, you need to be great at your editing pro tools,
Right, right, right.
right? Or you have to hold your own camera, you have to find your own angle, you have to make your own frame on a
Right.
daily basis. I'm not saying
Hmm.
this is something you do once in 14 days. You do this every
Sure.
day.
Correct.
So you need to really be on top of your game.
Hmm. Okay, well, you've given us lots and lots of food for thought. I hope a lot of youngsters watch this, and not only are they inspired by you, which they obviously will be, but they've got a lot of vital information and information straight from the horse's mouth. So, thank you very, very much for
Thank you.
making the time and talking to me. I know you keep very busy, and when you don't like to be disturbed at all. But thank you very much. It's been lovely chatting, and hopefully, I will see you soon. Take care.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. Big love to you and everyone who's watching this.